And just like that, hi everyone. This session is being recorded, and all of the chat questions that you all put in the chat will be emailed out to all registrants as well as on our past events webpage at collegeessaguy.com. So fear not, if you're worried about a link that we drop in there or a nugget of wisdom that one of my colleagues types in the chat, you will receive that after the fact. Captions are also available at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to mention in the chat where you're tuning in from and what grade your child is in. That gives us a kind of a sense of who's in the room. There's about 80 or so of us in here today, so it's nice to know where you all are coming from. I'm tuning in from sunny Southern California, which I feel kind of bad saying because I know not everywhere is experiencing that right now, like my poor family in Mid-Coast Maine. But regardless, happy to be here and happy to see where you all are tuning in from as well in the Zoom chat. So please do let us know and what grade your child's in. You're also welcome to ask any questions in the Zoom chat as well. We will all be taking turns giving our different tips about how to best support your child with the college process, but we'll also be looking out at the chat as well to see if we can answer some questions as we move along. And Renee, our lovely moderator extraordinaire, is going to drop in the chat a poll. It's a Google form. And if you can fill that out, we will be announcing a lucky winner of one of Ethan Sawyer, who's the college essay guy, his book that will be mailed to your house for one person who fills that out. It's a way for us to better get to understand your needs. There's some questions about how we can best support your child and some options for follow-up from our team about individual support. But with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Morgan, who will introduce us a little more in context.
Okay, thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for that warm start to the program, and welcome everybody. My name is Morgan Phillips, and I'm the Director of College Counseling at CEG, and I am in sort of cold and wet Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So that's where I'm calling in from tonight, but it's not as cold as other places, so I won't complain too much. On this slide, this is just kind of our introductory slide, so you can get a feel for who's on our team and a little bit about our professional backgrounds. You can sort of think about doing some math there and see that there's lots of experience. And Tom actually did some math for us, and you can see there's over 150 years of experience in college admissions on our team. That's across high school and college and a variety of other things that are related to the college admissions profession. So we have a lot of fun together, and we have a lot of experience, and we sort of combine those things to in our work as a team. And on the next slide, you get a little bit more of our personalities and just a little sneak inside look at who we are and, the fun we have and what makes us tick. And that's also shows a little bit of some more distinguishing factors. Lots of parents who have gone through the college admission process with their own teen on our team. So that's exciting. And we also, a lot of what we do is rooted in values at College Essay Guy, and we complete the values exercise frequently, as a team, and you'll see it if you ever exchange emails with us. It's on our email signatures, and one of my top values is helping others. So this being part of this presentation tonight is exciting for me because I feel like it's just one giant helping for parents who are, close to embarking on the college admissions process. We know that can be daunting, and we hope that we'll make it a little bit more fun, interesting, and help you be more informed from our time together tonight. All right, this is a preview of the 7 tips. I'm sure you've received our emails about signing up, so these shouldn't be a huge surprise for you. But each of the 7 counselors will go through and give you our tips, so our advice for you as we go through this. And just as our last opening slide, this is just a little food for thought. We are all continuous learners on our team, and we're often reading articles and, engaging in, topics on the field. And so this is a quote from one of our friends and longtime colleagues in the admissions world, Brennan Barnard, from an article in Forbes that just came out last week. And we just want to kind of ground our presentation in this idea tonight is that you're identifying supporters. And I think we think of ourselves as supporters for you in this, who are truly experts in admission based on continued years of practical experience. And that's something that we can really offer to you tonight. We know change is constant in admissions. And when you've been in this profession for a long time, you start to realize that that's normal and it's expected. And it's not as hard to grapple with or deal with when you actually have seen it, over time. So with that, we're going to dive right into our 7 tips. And our first tip is coming from Sandy Longworth. And here she is.
Hi there. And I just got a message that my internet is still unstable. So I'm just warning y'all, if I freeze, someone else can take over. So I've been with College Essay Guy for quite a while now. I've done a bunch of things with Ethan, but I feel like my sector of the company is really about adolescent development. So my training is mostly in human development. I'm trained as a narrative family therapist, and I've worked with teenagers both as a therapist, as a researcher, and as a high school counselor for pretty much my entire career. So my advice is to view this process as a way to help your student gain autonomy. So one of our jobs as parents is to help launch them, right? They live in our house, then eventually they don't live in their house. My children are 20 years old and they are sometimes living in my house. I just took them back to college. So one's in Tacoma, Washington, and one is in Los Angeles. And I literally just got off the plane about 5 hours ago from dropping them back at school. So, so one of our jobs again is to launch them. And as teenagers, they start to withdraw from us sometimes. And when they're little, a lot of times we're telling them what to do. We're directing them, put your coat on, put your mittens on, put your boots on. It's time to go. Let's get something to eat. And as teenagers, not only do they not enjoy that as much, but it doesn't help us get to know them. So really one of the things I feel like as a parent, the best way for us to help launch them is to get to know them and figure out what's best for them. So lead with questions. Open-ended questions are really the best way to talk to, I would say, any kids, but especially teenagers. So as many questions as you can, and really genuine curiosity. So going back to Morgan's comment on values, one of my top 3 values is curiosity. And so I genuinely want to know, when I ask things, kids are really astute to knowing if you're asking leading questions. So if you ask them a question and they're like, oh, you just want me to say this, they're kind of on to you. So, if you can lead with your curiosity, that really helps. The next tip with helping launch them is to use scaffolding. It's kind of a teaching term, but it's starting with demonstrating a skill and then slowly taking things away until they can stand on their own and do that skill on their own. And sometimes we don't even have to demonstrate it, right? Because they want to try it out. So asking them to teach us things. I'm going to jump down to the 4th thing and I'll come back up to the 3rd. But one of the things I love to do with teenagers at any age. So I know we've got parents here of juniors and seniors. I don't know if there's any younger kids. I do this as early as 9th grade with students, is our values exercise. So there's a link on there. It is a 1-pager that you can just literally hand to your student and ask them, like, what are 10 values that resonate with you? What are 10 things that are really important to you? Interestingly, they change a lot. So when I work with teens, I like to do it every year because what's important to them one year might be, it might change, might be something else the next year. But we really believe that once students identify what their values are, then they can start matching their behaviors to those internal values, right? So their behaviors and what they're doing should match what's important to them. So I find that to be a really interesting family. Like you could do it at dinner. Parents can do it as well. You can tell them what your top values are. So scaffolding, again, like you can do the skill first and then ask them to do it. Collaborate, that's a word I use a lot with teens. So my 3rd tip is collaboratively set boundaries around college discussions. And I'm realizing that is assuming that you do have boundaries. So that's also one of the tips really, is to have some boundaries, because kids get super frustrated everywhere they go when they're juniors and seniors. Uncles and parents and teachers are asking, where are you going to go? What do you want to do? And they get really tired of it. So talking to them, some students don't get tired of it. One of my twins could have talked every day, and my other twin did not want to talk very often. It was like maybe once a month. But we set up some, boundaries around, like, where will we talk? How often will we talk? Do you want me to bring it up? Do you want to bring it up? When I went on college tours with my kids, I asked them, do you want me to go as your parent? Do you want me to go as your friend? Or do you want me to go as a college counselor on these tours? Because these were a lot of schools that I had visited. And surprisingly, they both said college counselor. I'm like, oh, that's nice. I can share some of my, some of the things I know. But again, collaborating and talking to them and getting buy-in really makes the process much easier. Now, those are my tips.
All right. Well, thank you, Sandy. Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Atherton. I am delighted to have you here. Thanks for joining us. I am a CEG college counselor, and I'm here to talk to you about tip number 2, which is building a well-informed college list is the key to bringing ease, joy, and purpose to your teen's college process. And I enjoy talking about this because it's a really exciting stage of the process. This is when things really start to become real. You're starting to identify the schools that you're going to be applying to. Okay. Now, it's not the school necessarily you're going to be going to. It's a longer process that will happen later when you make that choice, when you have your offers. But at this point, you're identifying the schools you would like to apply to. Okay. So the things I'd like to talk about, first of all, is the idea of criteria. It's really important to be thinking about the criteria that you want to apply to help choose those schools you're going to apply to. Okay. And this is where values can come in. And Sandy talked about the values exercise that CEG offers. You identify the things that are really important to you. And those are the kinds of things you want to be looking for in the schools that you apply to. Okay. You may have seen some of these lists out there that identify criteria, a long list of different kinds of things like size of school, location, facilities, academic programs, et cetera, et cetera. And those are great. You can use those. You can rank those criteria from whatever you wish, a 1 to 10 scale. How important are they to you? But my point is, add additional things. Identify the things that are really important to you and put those on the list, okay? And anything is legitimate. It doesn't matter. If it's something that's important to you, it's a legitimate criterion, okay? So it might be that doing academic research as an undergraduate with a professor is important to you, okay? Put that down, rank that, because that will be more available at certain schools than at others. Perhaps having locally sourced food is really important to you in the dining halls where you're eating your meals. That's an important criterion. Put that down. The point is, identify the criteria that are important to you and use that to help find the schools that you're looking for. Okay. Second point, looking for balance. Very important. You've heard these categories of super reaches, which are the Ivy plus schools, Stanford, MIT, Caltech, et cetera. Reach schools, the maybes, the probables, the ones that you have a good chance of getting into, and this group called the likelies, where you have a pretty good shot. You have a good shot of getting into those schools. You want to make sure you have some in each of those categories, okay? It's easy to come up with the reaches and the super reaches. Those are the ones we get really excited about. But you want to be thinking about the schools that you really have a good shot at getting into. And there are lots of great options, okay? Sometimes people have trouble coming up with those, but there are some great ones out there. And the bottom tip, colleges that change lives that you see in the slide there. That's a group of smaller schools that focus very much on the undergraduate experience. They fly a little bit below the radar. People don't always know about them, but they're terrific schools and they do the undergraduate experience extremely well. So that's a tip to take a look at the colleges that change lives schools, okay? You don't need lots of schools. 10, 12 maximum. You don't need more than that. Again, if you've really thought about your criteria, you've thought about what's important to you, you've done your research, you can cover the bases quite well with that number of schools, okay? So you don't need 20, you don't need 25, 10 to 12 would be perfectly just fine, okay? Going on to visiting schools. For those who are able to do it, not everyone can, but if you can, it's great to go to campuses and visit schools in person. You just get a feel for a place, even by spending a couple of hours. It's interesting how you can go to a school, spend some time, and pretty quickly have a sense of, yeah, I could really see myself here, or nah, I'm not so sure. I think maybe not here. So to the extent that you can do that, we encourage you to go to schools and visit. And even during the summer, when schools are technically not in session, but they really are because almost all schools do summer programs. So you can really get a sense of what's going on, the vibrancy, et cetera. Okay, so go for balance. This is really important. You want to be trying schools in different settings. Thinking about an urban school, a suburban school, a school in a small town. You may think, I need to be in a city. I'm an urban person. I have to be in a city. Well, test that. Go to a school in a small town. See what that feels like. See about that sense of community. You might be surprised. So it's a way of sort of testing your assumptions, okay? And again, go to a large university, large research university where lots of things are happening. Try a small college. Again, try different kinds of things to get a sense of that. Finally, I'd just like to mention a resource on the next slide, which I think can be really useful. This is from a book called The College Finder by Stephen Antonoff. And College Express, which is a great resource, has compiled some of these lists. These are great ways to start to identify schools that you might want to consider. And there's different categories that you can see here. If you go to that list on College Express, there are some really interesting categories like colleges that are hidden gems, or colleges with interesting traditions, or private schools for the underachiever. They're kind of fun, and they're kind of fun to look at. So that's a resource you could consider taking a look at as you start to build your lists. Okay. With that, I'll stop and I'll pass it along to my colleague, Renee.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone. My name is Renee Ferrerio, and I am a senior college counselor here at CEG. And I'm coming to you with almost 3 decades of experience in school and college counseling. I'm super excited to be sharing tip number 3 with you, which is fostering healthy, honest communication about your parameters and hopes with your team. So usually when I start working with a family, I'd like to recommend or encourage the families to sit down and do what I would probably call a college planning meeting. That's where both the parents and students sit down and kind of lay out all of their hopes and dreams about the college process. You know, this process is going to look different for different families. However, I think 2 of the most important things to keep in mind about this discussion is that you probably want to have a discussion about finances and location. I have a daughter who just graduated college about 6-7 months ago. So if you go back to 5 or 6 years ago when we started this process, we sat down and I explained, we've saved this X amount of dollars. This is how much we can afford per year. You can apply anywhere you want as long as we can get the cost of attendance down to around that amount. So I didn't put parameters on where she could apply, but I did say that the finances were going to drive the end result. Okay, and she was okay with that up front. I also told her that there was a possibility that she might have to take out loans at some point. So she knew that that was a possibility, and we discussed that. The other thing we talked a lot about was location. And for some families, they have, you know, it's wide open, you can apply anywhere. But for other families, they may want their team to stay, you know, in the region where they are, or nearby, maybe on the East Coast or the West Coast, or possibly, you know, a 5 or 6 hour driving distance. You know, as Scott was mentioning, with different locations like settings, urban and rural and so forth, maybe your student wants to go to a city and you say, well, that's fine. I'm here in North Carolina and Raleigh is the closest city, and it's not a giant city, but so a city like that would be okay. But New York City seems a little big for an 18-year-old. So these are the conversations that you want to have with your student prior to them creating a list, and definitely before they actually apply. Because there would be nothing worse than them applying and putting all of this time in, and then on the back end being told, well, this isn't going to work out for these reasons. So that's one tip. The next thing would be really trying to stay clear of misinformation or non-facts, I would like to say. So I think the biggest source of stress in this process, and the process is very complex, and you know, as we said at the beginning, we have collectively a lot of years of experience, but I can say that I learn probably 4 or 5 new things every single day about the college process, just through reading and, you know, trying to dive into it. So I think the biggest source of stress for families is really just not understanding the process or believing something that's incorrect about the process. And then if you believe something incorrect and you pass that on to your student, or vice versa, your student finds out something that's incorrect, passes it on to you, it just multiplies the stress in the household. So trying to stay you know, close to the being informed, knowing what's going on as much as you can. I would start off, if you have school specific questions, encourage your student to reach out to their regional rep. You can find out who the representative is on the website, and your student can simply email them and ask, I have a question about your school, and they can ask and get the correct answer. If it's more of a general question, I would definitely consult the experts that you have access to. So that would be either your school or college counselor, depending on whether you have you're in a public or private school, an independent counselor if you have one. And then if those people cannot answer the correct question, they're going to pass you on to resources, possibly webinars, podcasts, blogs, other things that are trusted sources. So make sure you seek out the right information and don't believe what the neighbors said, and what you might have read on social media. And then the last point kind of reiterates the point that I just made, which is that the more informed you are about the process, the more realistic your expectations are going to be. And the more realistic your expectations are, the more you alleviate stress in the entire process. It's going to cut down on disappointment, and it's really going to set your student up for a successful process and hopefully a lot of acceptances and happiness in the process. So my recommended resource is the Jenny Kent and Jeff Levy, who run the Big J Education Consulting Service. They have a resource. And this quote I thought was appropriate. It's because college advising is both an art and a science, and I believe that it is. It is essential that we stay informed. So if we go to the next slide, this is just a couple snippets of some of the charts that are on this website. There's actually 3 charts. This is an example of 2 of them. The first one is a chart on early decision and regular decision acceptance rates. And the other one is domestic undergraduate need-based and merit aid facts. So you can look at admit rates and money for pretty much most of the schools that you want to apply to. There's actually a third chart that's for international undergraduate need-based and merit-based aid. So this is just a place that you can go to be more informed. And I am going to pass this on to my colleague, Tom.
Thanks, Renee. So hi again, Tom Campbell, your MC, quote unquote, from the beginning of the session. If you were here right on time, if you weren't, shame on you. I'm kidding. Speaking of time, it is the most precious resource that we have as human beings. It is not, something that we can just take for granted, take as a guarantee. And I know for you all as parents and guardians supporting students, your kids are busy, right? Like high school is not just sitting around doing nothing. Ideally, maybe your kid is doing that, but most likely, especially if you are interested in helping your child with the college process, I'm sure they're engaged in their classes. They're probably engaged in a range of clubs and organizations and activities. And the college process is often a really difficult time management issue for students because this is the first time of slotting in, okay, researching these schools, figuring out how to spend my summer experiences, or, how many times should I take the SAT or ACT? Should I even take it at all? There's a lot of questions as to how they need to allocate their time as high school students. And it can be really difficult to advise them as a parent or guardian if you don't know what actually makes a difference in their candidacy at these colleges, what actually is worth investing time and energy in. So one big resource that we're really big on at College Essay Guy, and we're actually doing a whole podcast series that's all about what colleges want. It actually just kicked off. So if you subscribe to the College Essay Guy podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, I don't even know if they do that, Spotify, wherever it is, we'll be releasing episodes that are based on a report by the National Association for College Admission Counseling, also known as NACAC. And basically what it is it's a survey of about just under 200 colleges and universities telling us all as college admission professionals and those who are supporting students and families, what is the most important when it comes to, actually what moves the needle on a student's application when it's submitted. So the chart is listed here on this slide, and also, the slides, we included them in the chat. So you're welcome to take a look at this going forward if you want to dive into this information a little more deeply. But some things to notice about kind of, these metrics is a lot of times families will ask, okay, well, of these 185 or so colleges that were surveyed, this data is from this particular year. So this is the most recent updated data in the industry around what a broad range of colleges and universities are looking for in their applicants. And as you can see, there are some real clear themes of some of the top qualities or attributes or elements of a student's candidacy, namely their grades, their courses, and the ways that they challenge themselves in high school based on what's available to them. That is the way, essentially, is if you are a parent of a younger student, that is kind of the foot in the door for many of these college admission processes. And if you don't kind of meet that first hoop to jump through, it's going to be a lot more difficult for your student to be able to have the widest range of college options possible, right? So of course, prioritizing academics first and foremost is the best key for a successful college outcome, no matter who the student is. But then there's certain things that you kind of see on this survey that it's like, oh, gee, I didn't know that, for example, AP scores were so not that important at such a wide range of colleges and universities. Or, wow, I thought the interview really tipped the needle on students so drastically. I think it's really important, kind of like Renee was sharing with her tip about the data from Big J consulting resources, the Jeff and Jenny Kent spreadsheets. college counselors, we literally have like a Facebook group, and there's like happy Jeff and Jenny Kent Day, because they give these updated spreadsheets to all of us, because having this data and the kind of balance of the art and science of college advising really does help, I think, us as professionals, and now of course you as parents having access to this, to know what is the most accurate, what is the most up to date, and not relying on information even from, if you have a child who even went through this process 3 years ago, 4 years ago, things change very rapidly. As you can see, for example, test scores are really low on this chart of schools and kind of how much they weigh at different colleges. It's very much one quote that actually I haven't heard us voice yet, which I'm very surprised about, is "it depends." So this is an aggregate, right, of all these different colleges and universities, but what you're not seeing is individual schools' responses to this. Many colleges offer what's called a common data set that allows you to know how each individual school factors in different components of the college process. So for example, level of an applicant's interest, or here it's listed as students' interest in attending. According to this, 15.7% of colleges consider that considerably important. That's, you know, the part of the college process that college visits, attending webinars that colleges put on, emailing college admission representatives to build a relationship with them, attending a college fair, if a rep comes to your student's high school. Those are all examples of what demonstrated interest means. At some schools, it matters a lot, clearly, you know, to 15.7% of these schools sampled, it means a lot. But there are other schools where it's just not a part of the conversation for their admission process and candidacy. So this gives you an overall picture of the landscape by and large. But as you start to build out your child's college list, looking at individual colleges, common data sets, understanding what's important to them will help you know how to best advise your child about where to spend their time, so that they're not prioritizing hours and hours and on end on extracurricular clubs or retaking an SAT 3 or 4 times if it's not really going to move the needle on their candidacy. So hope that's helpful. And I'm going to pass the mic on to Susan.
Thanks, Tom. That was a terrific overview of understanding what colleges are looking for in the process and how much different parts of the application are weighed. You might begin to start thinking of the application as a giant resume. Because after all, when we looked at that chart from NACAC, all those pieces kind of are the weeds of the process. What I'm going to ask you to do right now is to pull back and start thinking about the application process with a little bit of a different paradigm. I'm a big one on object lessons and kind of reframing a process to empower strength in that process. So go with me right now to a courtroom. Now, I'm a big fan of police procedurals. I'm getting a strange message on my machine here, sorry. Police procedurals. Think about the courtroom. Now, students, those of you that are on the call right now, and anyone applying to college in the future, yeah, you are the lawyer. You will have to get ready to argue your case before, guess what, a jury in the application process. What's the case? Well, you're going to make your case through the application. The application is going to give you the opportunity to be persuasive and convince the jury, who we know is the admissions committee at each and every college, to reach a certain verdict that will hopefully be in your favor. So what is the case? A case, and if you're a fan of Law and Order or any of the police procedurals like I am, you know that the opening statement is the beginning of the case. It's your profile, your demographics, and basically just the facts. If you think about the beginning of the college application, and all of you and parents, you've already become familiar with the Common App if you've gone through this with an older child. But whether you use the Common application, the Coalition application, or if a college or university still uses its own web-based application, the beginning of the application is always going to be simply the facts: who you are, where you live, what your family construct is like, what your citizenship is, and a variety of other descriptive factors. Next in a case in the courtroom comes the presentation of evidence. So what would evidence be? Well, it's your academic credentials, right? It's what courses you've taken, how you've done, where you've gone to school, what was available to you, how you sought to challenge yourself, and what courses of course you chose, especially as you worked your way through high school and had a little bit more discretion over your particular course program. The evidence is also the non-academic evidence. Those are your activities, your work experiences, your family responsibilities. It's how you choose to spend your time when you're not in class. Your time may be spent in school on school-based activities, and it may be spent in the community, and it may be spent at home. But that's the evidence. You are going to be presenting that as the heartbeat of your application. What's testimony? Because that comes next in a court case. Who gives testimony? Well, what do you have to say on your own behalf? When you speak with your own voice in a college application, you are usually writing. You'll be asked to write responses to questions that may be in essay format. They may be in short statements of 200 to 300 words. But this is your chance to speak in your own words, in your own voice, and decide what you're going to be saying. You might have a chance to interview, although a very small number of colleges still do interviews. If they're available, you should certainly take advantage of them to have an opportunity to speak with an interview, whether it's an admissions counselor, a student interviewer, or even a graduate of the college. What's the other side of testimony? That's going to be what others say on your behalf. These are going to be the people who write recommendations for you. Your school counselor will write in addition to the transcript that they supply. And also, most often, you'll be inviting teachers to speak on your behalf through letters of recommendation. You can also take the opportunity to ask a non-teacher to speak on your behalf. Colleges may call this the other recommender. That could be an employer. It could be someone with whom you've done community service. It might be someone who's taught you in an area outside of school or coached you. So the ending of a court case is what the lawyers call the closing statement. And this is known as the clincher. This is where cases are won or lost. Evidence has been presented, testimony has been given, and now it's up to the lawyer, the student, to clinch the verdict. It has to be persuasive, it has to be authentic, and it's got to be targeted to the audience that's going to be the jury. So the college's supplements are what I refer to as the closing statement, because this is where colleges ask their own questions. Otherwise, the applications are one size fits all. They are generic and used for multiple institutions. The supplements are what the colleges themselves are asking you specifically to report on. They might be short answers, they might be essays, they might be examples of creative and artistic achievement, and they might be different ways to ask you to be truly yourself and bring yourself to life in the application. On the second slide here, I want to show you what may be one of the most important questions that colleges ask on their supplements. And here, I'm just going to show this to you and let you know what this is, because you're going to become very familiar with it, parents and students. In the common application, and you can see over on the left side of the screen, these are the colleges that, if I were a student, that's where I'm applying. I've put my list of colleges in Common App. These are the people to whom I'm going to send in my application. The academic questions, which are highlighted there on the left in gray, are very individualized. I don't think students realize how individualized and how impactful these questions and the responses can be. I want to show you just two examples of how different this question can be, and then let you understand why they're so impactful. On the left happens to be the University of Texas at Austin. I picked a large university that admits by undergraduate college and by major. So here we have, you can see an engineering applicant who then specifies the actual engineering discipline in which they're interested. They're asked for a second choice and sometimes a third choice. My best advice here is, for your second choice, pick a less selective option. And you'll be talking with your counselors about that, right? That's a whole big topic. On the right is a liberal arts college. This happens to be Vassar College. And this is very typical that at a liberal arts college, you are applying and will be admitted to the entire college and not to a specific undergraduate division or major. And in fact, at liberal arts colleges, you'll have a chance to both jump into areas of interest that you already know you want to explore, but also to explore broadly outside of any particular focus, just to see what there is out there that maybe you think you'd like to go deeper into, or maybe you've never even had a chance to jump into. In either example, and these are the opposite ends of the spectrum, in either example, your application is going to be looked at for suitability for what it is you're expressing interest in studying. In the big university scenario on the left, you're going to be looked at for clear evidence of fit. So an engineering applicant would be looked at very differently from an international relations applicant than from a creative writing applicant. But the college reader, the application evaluator, is going to go right to your academic course program in the transcript and to your activities to get a clear sense of how you've come to the conclusion that that's what you would like to study and how well prepared are you. Word to the wise, some applicant pools in this scenario are much more competitive than others. And I would point to any of the professional programs, STEM, business, nursing, cinema, and I'm sure we could all think of some other ones, but those are going to be even more competitive applicant pools. On the right, you're going to be looked by a liberal arts college or a liberal arts division of study, as they're going to look for range for academic skills across the curriculum, but they're not going to be necessarily looking for as exact a match. That's what we talk about in college admissions as evidence-based. I've read applications for 3 types of universities, and the one right now that I'm reading for is a research university, and every single application, we have to answer that question about evidence for fit with the field of study and with the institution as a whole. So the word we use sometimes is alignment. You'll hear that from admissions counselors when they give you their group information sessions or webcasts. They're going to be looking for alignment between interests and academic and personal engagement. It's okay to be undecided. I don't want anyone to think that it's not, but it's not okay to be clueless. So an undecided student needs to be as prepared to defend and provide evidence of that choice as a student who's interested in a particular field of study. And we're moving on to our friend Adrienne.
Hi, thanks, Susan. My name's Adrienne Spraggins, and I'm a college counselor here at CEG. So my tip is, yes, college is transformative, but it's also a business. I don't mean to be like a Debbie Downer, but I want to put some perspective on this. So every college, every university is governed by a board of trustees, or sometimes called the board of trust. This board sets the direction the university will be going in the short term and the long term, and has a set of priorities or goals that it provides all the departments within the university, including the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at said institution. So the Office of Undergraduate Admissions has a set of goals that they need to reach for the bottom line for the institution, right? And these goals could be, look, we want to make sure that we are representing every state in the United States, that our undergraduate enrollment represents our student body, undergraduate community, however you want to phrase it, represents every state in the United States. And so we are going to make sure that we admit at least a student from all 50 states, including North Dakota, right? Other things that they may consider are majors of interest. Susan touched on this, but if they have a brand new entrepreneur center and this is new for them, you can be sure that students interested in entrepreneuring or entrepreneurship at said, and that are applying for that major, they're going to have a leg up in this instance, right? underrepresented backgrounds, students that are legacy students, meaning their parents went to that institution, students of donors, right? There are many more on the list. Oh, athletics can be a piece of it as well. Or just if a student is bringing something to institution, some skill set that the school values or feels they need at this particular admission, in this particular admission cycle. So the thing is that these institutional priorities, sometimes they're referred to as hooks, can change from year to year. And so we don't necessarily know what it's going to be. It's not like it's published somewhere of like, this is exactly what we're looking for, right, in a student. But what I think is important to keep in mind is these are things outside of your control. It's outside the student's control, the applicant's control, parents, it's outside of your control. And so we need to take a step back and realize that we can't take this personal, right? These decisions are not a personal, offense to you, whether it's, if your application is denied, it's your application is denied, but it's not you who's denied. It's just the application, right? What can a student do to put their best foot forward, though, is to make a very balanced list, as Scott talked about. Make sure that they have a list of schools where they could be happy at any of them, right? And then also make sure that you put a very intentional, authentic application together that illustrates all the wonderful qualities you'd be bringing to the college, right? But at the end of the day, you can't take this decision personally. It's not you, I promise. It's the college. The other thing I like to tell students is to remind them that they actually get to make 2 out of the 3 major decisions in this process. They have more power than they know, right? The first decision is where is the student going to apply, right? They get to determine the list. So they're getting to choose, okay, this is the pool of colleges to which I will be applying. Yes, then the college decides the admissions decision for their application. But then ultimately, the student gets to pick of the ones that they've been admitted to, where they're going to enroll. So you get 2 out of the 3 big decisions in this process. So hopefully that gives you a little more ownership of the process. And also, again, the reminder not to take it personally. I have a recommended resource for you to read talking about hooks or what institutional priorities that our dear friend Susan Tree here has written. So we hope that you enjoy that resource and read it to learn more. All right, I'm going to be passing it on to Morgan.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Adrienne. And this is our last tip for parents tonight, and we are excellent on time. So I just want to give you a little warning that if you have questions that have been sitting with you, that in just a few minutes, we'd be happy to answer some of those, or let you go early if you have other things you need to get to this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you are. So this last tip is sort of a little bit of wrapping everything we've said together and putting it into some context. And you can see here, so generalized advice about the college admissions process is valuable to consider, but this is a highly individualized process and it's grounded in each student's needs. And so this is where we get to talk about our favorite, it depends. And Tom mentioned this earlier. And it's sort of like, when you're talking about it or you're getting general questions, we sort of joke about this idea of it depends because there are so many nuances to answering questions in the college planning process. Questions can seem so simple. They can seem important and very simple. And we tend to, I, as someone who wants to help others, I tend to be instinctually drawn to answering those questions, all of them. And one thing that I've really started to pay attention to is like, we need full context to be able to do that. So examples of a couple of questions that really sound simple, but it depends. Should I apply test optional? That has a lot of context. Does it matter if I apply early or regular? Sure can, but it depends on the situation. And something like how many APs do I need to be competitive? And to one of the questions that was in the chat earlier, it really depends on school context and what is available to you and what you've chosen to take. So there's some fun with that it depends answer, but it's also really, there's a lot of truth in it as well. One thing that I observe in one of my roles at CEG, aside from college counseling, is working with parents whose students are working with us on college essays. on essay writing. And I see that sometimes students don't have college counseling support. And as they move further and further into the admissions process, especially over the summer into August, September, more and more of the questions that start to arise are less general and more specific to your situation. They just have more nuance. And to, the slide Susan showed about answering academic questions on supplemental pieces for colleges, there's just so much detail about what major are you choosing by school. And sometimes that's not the same for every school. So anyway, the overall point here is that it becomes more and more specific as time passes. And sometimes parents don't anticipate that to happen because it seems like at the outset, well, we have our list, we know where we're applying. So, we think we're good. We just have to fill out the applications. And it becomes more complex than that for many families. That's not it's said in any way to scare you or to, create a problem ahead of time, but it's just to point out what we observe about the way the process becomes more specific over time. And I think this third bullet here really resonates with what everyone else has said, which is around taking time to think about how you want to approach the admissions process with your student, with your child, as a family. I talk to a lot of parents throughout the application season, and I often have parents say things like, we're so glad we had this support because I couldn't have given my child that advice. They wouldn't have listened. And the fact that it came from a trusted adult, really helped preserve relationships in the family. And so that's always a wonderful thing when you've got that support. But think about that ahead of time, that do you have the right support? What does your team look like? And how will your teen engage with you? And is it enough, is what you have sort of a good fit for what your family's needs are? And then similar to the other point I was just making is that needs are not often evident until they are. And in this process, sometimes those needs are really time sensitive. So some examples of things that come up along the way as you wade further in as the months pass. So one is interview prep. That kind of pops up sometimes a few days before you have the interview, and students often benefit from having some guidance and mock interview prep on that. Writing letters of continued interest to your ED or EA schools where you've been deferred. This is something that most families don't want to plan for because you're hoping for that acceptance. But we know that often at this time of year, students are working on those letters, and that's a need that can arise. Another thing that I think about a lot, because I sort of am a Common App nerd, I think a little bit, like I love reviewing a Common App, just really getting into the weeds. And so that's an example of a need you may want to think about ahead of time, is who will be reviewing the student's Common App from beginning to end and providing feedback. Sometimes parents can play that role. It's just not a fit for every family for lots of reasons. And things like resume development is another good example. And then because, college counselors are not necessarily mental health counselors, but we do provide a supportive role that can help navigate the worry and some of the stress that goes with the process. And so that, I think, is a valuable part of making sure you have the right support team in place. All right, so on this last slide, okay, this is the last slide. You made it to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for staying with us. This slide is just a couple of 3 tiers to give you an example of the kinds of support that I was referencing in terms of the individualized element. And it's possible to get some of that in different ways. In the first category, you can see a somewhat individualized approach where we had one live essay review webinar, and we'll be hosting a few more this year. This is a really well-received event where you can come and submit, students can submit writing, or you can come and watch our essay coaches review essays live, like real time. And that's a really fun event. We're excited to bring that back. That's free and open to the public, so that'll be a great one. We also, I think, College Essay Guy as a company is known for all of the free resources. And so there's so much on the website that if you have a topic that you have a question about, it's very likely we have content available to you on the website, and some other examples there as well. in kind of that like middle range category. Many of you joining us tonight are probably members of our parent community. This is a monthly subscription based community where you can ask questions to our team. And we have events, live webinars twice a month for folks in that community. So that's kind of another way to get some support in there. And then lots of pay what you can live and on-demand courses. And there's so many of them, I'm not going to start naming them, but there's lots of them. There's a few examples here. And then lastly, we obviously as a team here, we do one-on-one college counseling and also work with students one-on-one for essay coaching. And that is when you have any service, like, things like test prep and things like that, that's one-on-one. Obviously, that's the most intensive personalized experience. And then our Matchletter Scholars Program is something we're super proud of and really just want to put a plug in for that. We work really hard to sort of be giving back and creating opportunities for access and equity in this process. And so Matchletter Scholars is free individualized college counseling support for high achieving low income students. And we think of ourselves as sort of like the Tom's Shoe Company of college counseling, where it's 1 for 1, if that is resonates with anybody. So for every student who's a paying client who works with us, we also support a student at no charge for free with an experienced counselor, essay coach. And that brings me a lot of joy in my work to know that we're contributing in that positive way, like to the world of college admissions, because it really brings deep care to so many more students who need the help. And that's really wonderful. I think so. We're at a great time here to answer some questions. I see some have come in the chat, so I'm gonna turn it over to Tom, who's like a master of managing chats, and let us know where you want to take it from here.
Sure, sounds good. So thank you all so much, my lovely colleagues. Huge shout out to all of us for cranking through those tips and leaving 6 minutes for question and answer for folks. So in general, I would say we've done a pretty good job of answering questions that folks had in the chat as we went through. But if you do have any other questions that we can potentially weave in, I'm happy to stay a few minutes on after. No guarantees for everyone on the team. I know, we all have lives and you're busy parents and families. You have kids to attend to, mouths to feed, bed to get to, whatever it may be. But I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes if folks have additional questions. So feel free to put those in the chat. I did want to make one more plug for the Google form. So that's one thing that I'll have Renee, our lovely moderator extraordinaire, Renee Caputo, not to be confused with Renee Ferrario, put that in chat. And I'll announce the winner of the book raffle in a few minutes. But if you fill out that form, it's a way for us to better get to understand you and your needs this year as you start to support your student. And let's see if I might actually be able to grab it if Renee is occupied. There you go. Renee just put it in the chat. So if you can fill that out, that'd be great. And again, we will be mailing a book, one of Ethan Sawyer, who's the college essay guy, founder of our awesome company. We'll be mailing that out to someone who fills that out. So definitely do it. I will definitely do it. That sounds like very like do it. So I'm not seeing additional questions here in the chat. In general, there was one question, for example, around, how reliable are college rankings? I personally recommend Washington Monthly if you're looking for a ranking system, because I know it can be difficult, right? Like to put in, like I mentioned before with my slide, time is our most precious resource. So it can be very difficult to feel like, okay, how deeply do I need to research every single individual college? Like, can I rely on some data analysis that some other folks have done to measure the things that are important to myself, or particularly most important to my child? So I think one thing when it comes to college rankings to be aware of is that their methodology, so the way that they calculate where a college falls on that ranking list, is very across the board. Some ranking systems, for example, the US News and World, up until recently, placed a very, very heavy portion of the ranking on the standardized testing averages of their students. Other things, for example, like the US News and World Report has one component that I believe has also lessened in importance called like peer evaluation. So basically the deans at all these colleges get a survey sent to them and they mark like how good a school is based on their perception of them. And it's like, there's no one stopping someone from like giving everyone a 0 and their own school of 5. So I'm not saying that's what it's like, but just these are some of the metrics that you see behind certain rankings. So when you dive, you peel back the onion, you start to realize that not all of them evaluate the things that are most important to your child. So Washington Monthly for many students is one that I feel like is in alignment with their goals because it's a lot about social mobility. They have a lot of metrics around students who go in from a certain socioeconomic background and their likelihood of leaving with job placement opportunities and other ways to keep that social momentum going. So it just depends on, again, it depends on what's most important to your child and you in terms of this process. The elephant in the room, I'd say, is that like prestige is something that is really real for a lot of students and communities, right? And we don't want to say like, you shouldn't care about that at all, because many of you are coming from lots of different cultural contexts, backgrounds, environments where maybe that is something that in the country you're tuning in from, rankings are something that a lot of HR representatives and hiring companies look at for their students. We're all coming from different places when it comes to how the name of our school impacts the way that people perceive us and our opportunities going forward. So that's why, again, individual college advising and support is great to tap into when this landscape has become very competitive, especially for these more prestigious schools. So having someone help you identify ones that are in alignment for as many of your wish list points as possible is something we definitely recommend. Is anyone else seeing any questions in the chat that they want to address live to the group? Any final thoughts?
Well, there's that new question, Tom. For those just starting out, is there a city or location you'd recommend to visit to see a range of schools and get a feel for large, small, public, private, urban, and rural? That is, I feel like my initial answer to that question would be that it helps to talk to the student and get a sense of what they're drawn to and also where you live and what's the feasibility of travel. So I would look at some practical concerns first, like where do you live, what's nearby. Sometimes students can go to a college that's somewhat near to their home and start to rule out a type of school before you travel further afield. But then usually when we have students fill out questionnaires, they can share pretty early on in junior year, sometimes earlier, indications about the type of setting they prefer or the region of maybe the US that they'd like to be in. And those can be driving factors too. So starting with the student would be interesting. I would actually be curious if you ask your student to make a list of some of their favorite cities or qualities they might want, would that be informative as to where to start? That's a great example from Colorado.
Yeah, I'm definitely really big on like going to schools in your own backyard, or as close to as possible, because it gives you that chance to be able to try on things off the rack. Like you can't really know if it's going to be a fit. So many times students would come to my office and be like, when I worked in the high school setting, they'd be like, I want a school that's this size because I'm sick of being at a small school and I want it to be a big, great experience and, really spread my wings. And then I'll be like, okay, well, you should go and visit those schools and see if it's a good match. And many times they would come back and be like, actually, like, it was kind of intimidating. Like, it was really big and I didn't know as many people and I felt really overwhelmed. And I'm like, well, maybe you actually might prefer a more medium or smaller size school based on now you have that more informed awareness, right? So definitely leveraging things in your own backyard is great because it does limit the cost of having to book flights or a rental car or drive somewhere, housing when going to visit some of these schools. So yeah, it's something I definitely recommend. One thing I was going to mention about list building in terms of location, this is just a plug for Renee Ferrerio and myself. We actually recently did a podcast called Colleges in the South. It's part of a series at College Essay Guy where we have many ongoing projects. You should see, like, if we were a kitchen, you would just see like all these burners like on slow simmer, some boiling, like lots of things that we're cooking up behind the scenes. But we are planning on doing more regional spotlights. But this is great if you have students who are interested in colleges in the South. Renee, who has spent her entire college counseling career counseling in that fine region of the US, gave a lot of insights onto different college options there, things to think about, tips around the flagship public system there, as well as some private school options, affordability scholarships. So we're hoping to do more of those spotlights because we think they're really helpful, but one day at a time. Awesome. See that Sandy put some resources for Craig's question. Thank you for that. All right, it looks like we're going to be able to wrap up pretty much just 2 minutes over on time because College of the South is a podcast. It's in the link. It's in the chat there in case you're curious. I'll post it again. So thank you so much again for attending. I can go ahead and announce the, let's see, the Google form submission. Usually the way that I do this is I just scroll through on the sheet, and I don't know if the person who filled this out is still attending, but I'll just go ahead and scroll really quickly and then just place my cursor on where it ends up. Susanna Shenvax. Congratulations, Susanna. We will be mailing you a book, Ethan Sawyer's book, to help your child with their college process. And for the rest of you tuning in, we hope you can attend future sessions that we're putting on, whether it's publicly, just we send sometimes sessions out to our entire email list, but definitely the parent community is a great place to get sessions and FaceTime with our team going forward. I can put the link in the chat to the parent community as well, in terms of joining. There's also a link in the slideshow that you all have, and you'll get a follow-up email too around this. But this is a great way to, at a low-cost monthly fee, to get FaceTime with our team. We do 2 sessions per month, one that's geared towards parents of 9th through 11th graders, and then those who are current seniors in the process, those who are helping a senior with their college list. So definitely check out the parent community. We put a lot of time and effort into those sessions, a lot of expertise, as we mentioned. What is it, 150 plus years? Can't tell by looking at us. We may have set the Zoom filter up on Touch My Appearance to the max, speaking from personal experience. And I'm the youngest one here, so that's pretty sad. But anyway, really, really glad that you all were able to tune in. We hope we can be of service to you going forward with your process. And as we say at College Essay Guys, stay curious. Spreading ease, purpose, and joy through the internet. Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Good night.